today we're going to be looking at the Tower of Babel, and we're also going to be looking at Nimrod. He's a pivotal figure in this little tale, and we're gonna focus in on Nimrod first. And in order to look at Nimrod, we're gonna have to go to chapter 10, and starting at verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Number 9, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Now I wanted to point out something about what it says about Nimrod. It says he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Now, a mighty one there is the same mighty one that they used for the fallen angels in Genesis 6. It actually is Nephilim, or Nephatal, in the Hebrew. And for him to begin to become like them suggests that something was strange about Nimrod. Nimrod was not actually normal. And when he says he was a mighty hunter, most people think he was a hunter, like hunting animals. That's not actually the case. Hunter, in that connotation, he was a hunter of men, a hunter before the Lord.
So Nimrod is a mighty hunter of the Lord.
Before the Lord.
So, for the Lord, sorry. So that would seem to imply that Nimrod was somehow under, like, God's direct command, or he was sort of an agent to God.
No. Nimrod literally means the rebel. Before the Lord means he was standing against God. He was hunting people who worshiped God.
And so he built a city.
Yeah.
What is it? What's the purpose of the city? To spite God? Is a city full of people that kill as well? What is the purpose of that person creating a city?
Well, if we look at chapter 11, we can actually find out. And the whole earth was of one speech, one language, and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelled there. And they said unto one another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime, and they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad the whole face of the earth. So basically they were saying that they wanted to make a tower to heaven. Now, a lot of people will take that as they wanted to build a tower so high that it would get to heaven. But really they were trying to usurp God by making their own religion. And so the way that they made their towers was pretty much a ziggurat. You might see those as the kinds of pyramids you would see in Mexico or in South America. So they were building a ziggurat, and each level kind of was like a rabbinical study. Not a rabbinical, I wouldn't say that. But it was sort of study. You had to reach ascertain a certain rank. And then you'd learn more, and then you'd ascertain another rank. And as you climbed up the steps, eventually get to the top where Nimrod was, and his wife, Semiramis. And so they were trying to create a religion to oversee everyone, right? And they were saying they didn't want to be scattered across the world. They wanted to keep everyone together, which they wanted to have the control over the people. Nimrod was kind of like a military commander, basically. And he was trying to control the entire world with that. And he knew he needed the people in order to do that.
And he was trying to snuff out people that were religious.
Right. So that he would be worshipped himself.
Nation, is that, do you agree with that interpretation?
Yeah, no, when I was inquiring about Nimrod and his name, I was just trying to play devil's advocate there for a second. Because most people in Western culture, they associate Nimrod with Looney Tunes. Because Bugs Bunny would, like, refer to Elmer Fudd as Nimrod. And, that's explained as just meaning mighty hunter and everything. So it's kind of, there's a bit of obscurity there. The interesting thing with the ziggurat is that it's an unfinished pyramid.
It is. There is no
Like, so-
capstone.
There is no capstone. And if you look at so there are different diagrams and there's different things online. But basically, yeah, it's the unfinished pyramid. And then having a ruler or a leader sit atop the pyramid as the capstone. And as Nimrod wanted, that's sort of the symbology of the all-seeing eye, the surveillance state, and everything. Nimrod wanted to elevate himself as God. And he thought he could do
Nimrod
it because
held that position.
yeah. And because he had probably, I think it's fair to say, he had some form of modification or some change in his person that gave him probably some form, again, like the Titans in the Greek myths, you have these gods, these god men coming down and with powers and such. I mean, Nimrod probably possessed some kind of supernatural ability that made him feared and that gave him sort of the authority and power to command those under him.
Right. And it could have been that he was just so skilled of a fighter and he was like really tough and buff that he was able to at least convince people that he had that power. Clearly he was not a guy to be messed with. From what
And he clearly was pretty smart too. It's not just like he's some like big rough and tumble like meathead. Like he's like, we're gonna build this pyramid, we're gonna build this ziggurat to heaven, we're gonna exert our dominance over this world and over God himself. He'll never be able to flood us again because we'll build so high. And we'll use our magic and use our whatever to storm heaven itself.
Right.
So he clearly, he was he knew what he was doing. It wasn't just some, like arbitrary thing.
Well, he most likely had a pact with Lucifer or Satan to do this, and the reason being is because he sought out a wife, and her name was Semiramis, and she was worshipped as a goddess along his side. And how he found her, she was a prostitute, but they lied and made a story that she came out of the sea, and that she was this virgin wife of Nimrod, yada yada yada, and she controlled the religious studies, right?
So, and that's how that makes sense. It would explain why you get like priestesses and all those sort of.
That's right.
Women in pagan religions, kind of, there's a big fixation, especially with like witchcraft and the occult. And New Age stuff. Women are more drawn to that. It kind of makes sense that the origin of those religions did come from a feminine source. But how do we know that about Nimrod's wife? Where do we get that information from?
It's the ancient legends of Babylon. Babylon has a lot of ancient legends that were actually kept. A lot of it is actually kept within their actual buildings. There's architecture and stuff like that. They carve their stories into things, and there's tablets and stuff you can find. They have a lot of legends.
So what's the Babylonian origin myth? Like, how do they say they got there? What do they say?
I'm not actually versed enough on their origin myths. I do know that Babylon believed in a couple of dragons that got into a war with each other.
But they hold that they were founded by Nimrod, and that their gods came from his wife, or that their religion came from his wife.
They held that Nimrod was a god. And they actually they call. It's funny because Nimrod pops up later on in the Bible, and he's actually being called Baal, which means King of Kings. That's what Baal means, Lord of Lords, or Lord over Lords. And it's funny because Nimrod is mentioned as being against God. He was after God.
So is again, I'm just gonna be like be a bit thick for a second. So how do we know Nimrod is Baal? How do we know there's like a crossover there? Like Nimrod known as Baal or something, or like
Well, because the original king of Babylon, right? The first one that they have all their legends about was a hunter, and the stories intertwine, and it's Baal. Yeah, it was their leader.
So it's kind of like Okay, so let me get this straight. So the first leader of Babylon, whom they worshipped, became to be known as a god was Nimrod, right?
Right. Yep.
So is it kind of like, I don't know, I'm trying to think like where they deify, where they
It would be kind of like the Romans. You know how the
Well, I was
Romans
thinking-
start
yeah, like,
deifying
yeah, so
their
there's-
people?
was Romulus a god though? Did they make
But-
Romulus a god? Or
They
Romulus,
called
Romulus
this-
became Jupiter?
And that's yeah, exactly. He became Jupiter.
Yeah.
They actually
Okay.
took pre-existing gods and they were usurped by
Right.
humans.
Right. So Nimrod was a human. They acknowledged was a human, but he there's a apothesized, or he was risen up and he became a god.
Right.
And
And
then he
it's probably
became-
because his status, once again, that people started
Right.
looking at him as a god.
Right. I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was something
no,
wrong with Nimrod that was not completely normal.
Yeah. Well, he
Uh,
probably
according-
did have.
If you look
Go
at
on.
the legends of it, right? Semiramis, this is the really interesting part about it, because this is where I think Satan was involved in this directly. Because it had already been prophesied that there'd be a son that would be coming down, right? And because it was going to be through Abraham's family that was going to happen. That's already been promised. And so Nimrod has this wife, Semiramis, and they have a son called Tammuz, right?
Mhm.
And together they were supposed to form their own little trinity. And Tammuz ended up falling in love with his mother, right? And his mother actually, fearing Nimrod, got mad at this apparently, and fearing it. This is how Nimrod supposedly died, according to their lore. She had Nimrod murdered by the high priests, and she took on place as the ruler. And if you notice, there is a change in the dynasty, kind of the way that they settled themselves, because they started building walls, and she became known as the goddess of walls also.
Mhm.
And so it was more or less fearing that they'd be avenged, right? Well,
Right.
Tammuz, finding out that it was his mother that killed his father, he kills her.
Mhm.
And so they have this weird sacrificial ritual going through with each other. Like, subscribe, and favorite, and remember to share this with everyone you know.
Share it with people you don't know. Go to work, go to work, put on the little, welcome board, a little link. A link that they can click, I don't know. And we have a Patreon. We have a Patreon too, so, if you have too much money, and let's be honest, you probably do, give us, share a bit of your burden with us, We'll gladly take it off your hands. I mean, you rub our back now financially, and we'll rub your back later. Humble listener.